The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar, Influencer Marketing, Gateway to Today's Higher Education Decision Maker. I'm Elizabeth Burkhardt, and I'm the Marketing Director here at Agile Education Marketing, and I'm also joined by another marketing team member, Kara Murphy. So I will be moderating and hosting our panel today, and Kara will be working with everyone on their questions, making sure that they get properly sifted out toward the end. She will be running a few polls for us today. And she also asked that I let you know that after the end of webinar survey, you will have a chance to request a free consult if you'd like that. So be sure to fill out the survey. One of the big things with that is it helps us determine what other topics we're going to cover in the future. So we really do appreciate you giving us your input. But for today, we also are offering a free consult. So be sure to do that. Kara will also be working with anyone who has technical difficulties. So if you can't hear or your video is wonky, she will do her best to help you troubleshoot that. On that note too, we are recording today's session. We know that everyone's bandwidth at home is really pushed to the limits these days. I myself have 2 kids doing online learning, and my husband is also working from home. So there's 4 people really pushing it today. So if I need to turn off my video, I will do that. Kara will let me know if my audio gets a little crazy. And if you yourself have any interruptions or anything go on with your internet, do not worry about it. We are recording today's session, and so you will get that in a follow-up from Kara either later today or tomorrow. And you can also feel free to share that with anyone as well. Let's see, what else do we want to cover? Everyone's going to be on mute for the duration of our time together today, with the exception of myself and our panelists. And we ask that you give your questions during the session. That's completely fine. On the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a question widget, and just put it in there. And that way, Kara can let Tami or Ashley know the questions, who it's appropriate for, et cetera, and we'll cover those toward the end. So let's go ahead and introduce our panelists. So you probably can see them on video, and we are joined by Tami Nealy. She's with Find Your Influence, and she is their VP of Communications and Talent Relations. We are also joined by Ashley Chitwood with Naropa University, and she is the VP of Marketing and Enrollment Management there. So we're really delighted to have the 2 of you join us today. And the reason, here at Agile that we wanted to bring these 2 people together, and these 2 experts in the higher ed market as well as influencer marketing, is that we know that things are really different right now. So even though some universities are open, it's a really different campus, and it's much harder to access the people that you're trying to get in front of to help and serve. And so we know that influencer marketing can be a really great way to reach people through digital channels. So we've got Tami, who's really going to give us the ins and outs of that, and Ashley can really help us to understand some of the nuances of doing that in the higher education space. So let's move on to our agenda. So what are we going to cover today? So we're going to start with what it is. What is influencer marketing? Why it works? And what are some of the unique things about influencer marketing in the higher education space? Then we're going to hand it over to Tami almost exclusively, and she's going to really take us through how you find the influencers, how you design a program, and we're going to finish off with handling controversy. So the way that we're going to do this, because it's a panel, is I'm going to do my best to moderate everything and set up, each different section that we're going to go through, and then give both Tami and Ashley a chance to, set things up and then share their point of view. And so that's what you can expect today. So I'd like right now, if I could, Tami, to hand it over to you, and let's get started with what is influencer marketing?
Well, thanks, Liz. Influencer marketing is really that art of connecting brands with those powerful voices of content creators online. And so what the goal is to empower those content creators to experience your product, and through their content they're creating to really drive awareness and engagement with your product or your brand, really. And so when a lot of people think about influencer marketing, they think about the Kardashians or Kylie Jenner and all this. That's not who we're talking about today. Influencer marketing really in that consumer space, you see a lot of fashion and beauty and CPG products, food and beverage, maybe even automotive. And yes, that's influencer marketing, but we're also going to talk about that, how that works within the higher ed space today. And that influencer has achieved that level of influence, whether they have 2,700 followers, 27,000, or 270,000 followers, based on a few things. Their audience values them, they're seen as a trusted authority, and they're reliable. A lot of times, me personally, the people who I follow on social media, I feel like I have a relationship with them. I have a connection in one way or another. I like their style. I like maybe how they parent their teenagers similar to my teenagers. Maybe I follow someone aspirationally because maybe I want that lifestyle, or I'd love to have that beautiful living room set. So there's a lot of reasons we follow influencers. And again, that can transcend from these everyday influencers that we're seeing on Instagram into the higher education space. And a lot of times people think influencer marketing is on Instagram only. And yes, that's really where it's most powerful today. But there's a lot of other places where it can be just as effective. It can be just as effective on LinkedIn, more in that B2B space on LinkedIn. Podcasts, you can see this image that Liz and her team put up of me. I was a guest on a podcast called Uniquely Placed. The company is called Chassis. I'm not 100% clear on what Chassis does, but they brought me in because they wanted to talk to me about how I got to where I was in my career. They're very supportive of women and individuals and their kind of career journey. So they brought me in as a thought leader in that perspective to be a guest on their podcast. Now, I haven't used their products. I don't know what it is. So I'm not necessarily an influencer there, but they brought me in because of my thought leadership as my career has progressed throughout the communications program. So podcasts are a way that you can share a message as an influencer. Webinars, kind of what we're doing right now. I think you brought Ashley and myself in because you thought we were thought leaders in our respective spaces. And then going back to social media too. Certainly activate on Instagram. There's a lot of power there. But if the people you're trying to influence aren't on Instagram, that's really a waste of your time and energy. You want to go to the places where they are every day.
Great, thank you for that, Tami. So let's talk a little bit about why it works in higher education. And, you know, Tami, I'm going to start with you, and then Ashley, I'll hand it, you know, before we move off this topic, I'd like for you to you know, share some of the things that are, you know, that make it work in higher education. And Tami, for the audience, I grabbed this, this example so that there's some pieces that Tami could point out that can make it more powerful. And I believe this is from LinkedIn. And so this is, you know, Andrea Samadi, who has a business in neuroscience and social emotional learning, training and professional development. And she pulled in a client of hers, the University of Phoenix, and Peter Cohen. So this is an example, you know, specifically of how it happens in the higher education space. And, you know, so Tami, kind of walk us through this and what it is that that lets it work in this market.
So I think, first of all, what you can see about Andrea's post on LinkedIn is that she tagged the University of Phoenix. So that's going to show up for whomever's managing their social media accounts. They're going to see it and say, oh, wow, look at, we're quoted here or we're sourced here. They may repost that on LinkedIn. They may share it across their different social channels, but you're bringing it to their attention because you're tagging them in there. And then the hashtag that she used, it looks very small on my screen. I think it says hashtag higher ed. There are that is a huge hashtag within LinkedIn, obviously within the higher ed space, and individuals who, you know, whether you are a university registrar, an admissions officer, you're in the purchasing department, you're in the marketing department. A lot of times you might be searching for hashtag higher ed, hashtag campus resources, whatever it is you're looking for. You can search LinkedIn using hashtags the exact same way you can search Instagram using hashtags. So it's very, very important. And again, what Andrea did here is she thought, okay, this can live on my page, but if I tag other people, there's a likelihood that they can share it too, and I can reach their audience, which could be introduced then to Andrea and her offerings, what she can offer those people as well.
Yeah, thank you. So Ashley, you know, why in higher education, why would it work? What makes it a powerful channel for the higher education market?
Sure, and I'll get into a little bit more about the higher education ecosystem of possible entry points, but it works well because faculty or even administrators carry, I'll use the word clout, in their circles. So if you are a science professor, if you are a well-known, recognized administrator, you do have a following of people who are looking to you to give advice on systems, on operations, on products, on things that have supported you in your position as a faculty member, as an administrator. And so these tactics and this strategy is extremely effective when you know the entry point that is going to be most lucrative to what it is you're trying to position with any given client or need.
Thank you. So let's continue on this, right? So what is it? Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot about this part. Tami, can you walk us through some of the nuts and bolts? And then we're going to move into some of the things that make it unique.
Certainly. So all of this data was prepared by an agency called Media Kicks. And every year they're really diving into influencer marketing and how it works. I was just on a webinar with them last week, Wednesday, I think maybe. And they were talking about how they're not doing this survey in 2020 because of COVID. It's really an anomaly year. And I think the anomaly is that influencer marketing we've been growing, and now it's just taken, like, the boosters are on and it is off the charts. So I think any data they pulled this year would certainly be an anomaly because the growth can't continue at that pace year over year. But looking at the data they have here, in 2019, it shows that influencer marketing spend will increase by 65%. And the reason that is it's a low cost to entry. So when you think about all of the other ways that you can spend your marketing dollars, you can spend it on digital ads on LinkedIn, you could spend it on TV, print, radio, you can spend it with the Chronicle of Higher Education, you can buy an ad in there, you can sponsor content in there. There's so many different ways you can market your message to your audience. Influencer marketing, you can do it $5,000, you can do it $50,000, you can do it $500,000. So there is an entry point at any budget for influencer marketing. So it's not surprising that the spend will increase because brands may enter at maybe a $500, $5,000 entry point, see the success, and then say, okay, this worked, let's put more into it, and see these results grow even further. The middle one, what is your annual budget for influencer marketing in 2020? I did some fast math this morning, and 49% of those surveyed are spending $50,000 or more annually on influencer marketing. And I think the 51% that's spending less than $50,000, I think those are people who are just getting into it. They also may be small business owners where their entire marketing budget for the year is $50,000, and that makes sense too. They want to diversify. But what I think is most interesting about all this data is that it's not going away. This is I think it's projected to be a $9.3 billion industry by the end of this year. I feel confident those numbers will be far surpassed because of the pandemic and so many people at home. We're spending more and more time on social media. Brands know that, so they're investing heavier into those channels.
Yeah, thank you very much for that overview, Tami. And I think, you know, it's a strong channel, and I think that people are going to move a lot to it. You're right, because of COVID. And then I think that it'll be really interesting to see moving into next year how much of that sticks. So let's start with understanding the higher education ecosystem, and this will help us really understand like what it is that's unique about this market. So Ashley, can you go ahead and talk to us a little bit about higher education, how it works?
Sure. So understanding the ecosystem is extremely important when you are trying to find entry points into a very large system that has a lot of different influencers at different levels for different reasons. I think that oftentimes the complexity of higher education or universities in general is so oversimplified that it's a challenge to find an entry, a gateway to put your ideas or products in front of the right people at the right time. And so what I want to express in this, this image is that whatever it is we are looking at, it has to tie back to the student success and the experience in which the student receives. Every higher education institution in one form or another is dedicated to student success and the student experience in one form or another. So being able to tie it back to that and understanding that the new students who are coming in are looking at the added value for that. The parents are looking at who's connected to the university, who the alumni are, what are the outcomes of their students when they attend that university and get a degree. The current students, what are they experiencing? What's happening in the environment, in the social environment that is impacting their success and their experience? I brought up the alumni that are exiting the college but have connections now and are working in industries who also have tie-ins to that university and still have a voice and leverage, which is a very, very powerful, underutilized entry point, I think, for many universities. Not only do folks who graduate from a university still have ties, if the university is doing their job and preparing students for vocational outcomes, for a holistic life that includes financial prosperity, emotional well-being, etc., it is a good time to connect with those alumni. And oftentimes they want to contribute back to the university, and sometimes they don't know how to do it. So they might be getting messages from the university about how they can donate to a specific cause. For those looking for entry points, alumni are a good place to bounce ideas off of, who sometimes can be donors to those specific technological needs or software advancements. It's a great opportunity that is often missed. Board members are usually affiliated not through graduating from a university, but oftentimes have connections to local businesses or large businesses that are also a great entry point for them to float ideas or business solutions or products to a cabinet or to an executive team, especially if it's being influenced by a board member who's sitting. And that's easily found on institutional websites, those specific names. And then obviously you have staff and faculty who they need to connect their asks to the student experience, but raising the ask for a product or a service to the executive level for it to then get approved for a system-wide evaluation can be a struggle. I'm not saying it's the wrong place to look, but it's definitely a lot of consideration and thoughtfulness that goes into addressing staff and faculty and getting in front of them. And then thought leaders, similar to the board members, about what they can contribute. And I mentioned this earlier as connection to Tami's why this works, is the thought leaders want to hear from other thought leaders across the higher education, across the globe, really, of what's working in the classrooms, what's working for research technology, what's working that we can capitalize on, and who do I want to follow for that. And similar to what I mentioned about the alumni is donors. So that is really a high level snapshot of all the different entry points that are possible. But as an administrator, it's important that those looking to connect with us understand those connecting points and ultimately what it is the university is trying to achieve.
And what I like about this slide, Ashley, that I hadn't seen before today, was that everybody you put in those yellow boxes, those are all potential influencers. And when we did speak before, you had mentioned that word of mouth marketing had worked. Influencer marketing is the new word of mouth marketing. You're just paying or incentivizing someone to spread their experience with it. Now, you're certainly not going to select a new student who only enrolled for 6 weeks and then transferred somewhere else. You're going to find people who generally rise to the top as an ambassador or a promoter already. But this is a great description to show that even parents and board members and beyond the staff and faculty and new students that you may think of, even potential employers can become those influencers for you.
Yeah, so thank you both, because this was really helpful to me as well. And I think that the higher education space is it's different, it's unique, and we could do a 3-hour series on how to navigate this. But thank you for making it really simple and easy for all of us to understand, Ashley. I appreciate it. And Tami, yeah, exactly. These are the people that could help you get into the right people. So now that we understand, influencer marketing is here, huge jump this year, probably here to stay, and we've got our arms around how does it work? How does business work in the university space? What's unique about higher ed marketers, the actual influencers? And this is where I'm going to ask Tami and Ashley to just share their own points of view on some of the things that you really want to think about, and especially some of the things that are different. I have more experience on the K-12 side, and I know that there are some things that educators really have to be cognizant of. And so what are those things that higher education market influencers need to be careful of and think about? And Tami, let's start with you, and then Ashley, I'll hand it over to you.
Well, I'm going to start at the bottom of this list from a compensation perspective. A lot of times when you're working with influencers or you're engaging a thought leader to do something, there's some sort of compensation or gifting. So if we're thinking about traditional influencers, let's say we're talking about a beauty influencer. He or she is likely gifted the product, and then there's either a compensation or just a gifting in exchange for the content post. And either way, that, according to the Federal Trade Commission, the law is that it has to be disclosed. So any sort of content that's posted like that has to have hashtag ad or hashtag sponsored included in there. I don't think the Federal Trade Commission is an organization that anyone wants to get into trouble with, so we need to follow those rules. But when we were talking about, back on Ashley's last slide, where we're talking about whether it's donors or faculty or staff or all of that, I used to work at Parchment, which is an education technology company. And when we would go to conferences, we would bring in thought leaders from universities in to speak on, maybe we're rolling out a new product. We would bring in the director of admissions operations from Ball State University or the registrar at Elon University. While they were up there speaking, they weren't saying, we are being compensated by Parchment for this. We never paid them, but we certainly covered the expenses of their airfare and their hotel and their meals while they were there. And I think maybe from a conference perspective, that was understood. And that's not, I don't want to call that influencer marketing. It's not being managed today the same way that the FTC is not managing that the same way they are any sort of content that's being posted and shared socially. So that's just the big thing that I wanted to point out. If there is content being created on social media channels and there is any sort of compensation, that has to be disclosed.
Okay, thank you, Tami. And Ashley, what advice would you give to vendors, suppliers, curriculum people, if they want to get into this and they want to have some influencers?
Sure. I mean, don't be afraid of this as seeing it as a barrier to entry. It's something to just simply be aware of. And in a lot of cases, universities have a lot of controls around this type of thing. It's built into faculty contracts that are reviewed on a regular basis for a lot of different reasons. And it becomes a basic practice, especially as faculty in a not so much a new sense of influencer marketing, but faculty going out and doing presentations at events, for example, or doing shared presentations and the co-branding and that type of thing. So really a consideration is just to know that those things are going to come up and to be nimble and thoughtful in the different ways that you could work with different influencers within the university as it relates to that university's specific guidelines and considerations when it comes to compensation, the ask of the university as it relates to anything that is university content, not necessarily the content of the faculty. If it's a product purchased, for example, by the university itself, especially public institutions, which is taxpayer dollars, how that's represented publicly is also very important. So again, not a barrier to entry, a lot of personal responsibility on the influencer you're asking, and they should be more or less aware of what their requirements are for the university and the system, but just something to be aware of as you enter the space.
So thank you both for that. I appreciate you guys sharing that. So let's move into actually crafting a program. And so Ashley, if you wouldn't mind continuing with, what are the major challenges? And then Tami, I'll hand it over to you and let you kind of walk people through some of the major things about actually designing a program. So Ashley, what are some of the challenges that, the higher education institutions are facing right now?
Sure. Obviously, a lot of what we're facing is connected to COVID. Very rational things that we're all aware of the changing operations, the dramatic shift from an on-campus experience to an online experience. Some universities facing the implications of a significantly reduced auxiliary revenue through events and sporting and foods and that type of thing. That looks different for every university. So being thoughtful and respectful to what the university and those influencers are currently facing and how you approach a partnership is important. The intangible student experience, obviously all of our lives have been changed dramatically through this, but the universities are now facing challenges of meeting the emotional needs and the supply needs of students who maybe don't have reliable access to internet, do not have reliable connection emotionally to get the support for mental health. And so a lot of those challenges are coming about this lack of connectedness, and that lies directly on that entire ecosystem of the university. It connects to the student success and the student experience when the universities are facing the mental challenges of these young kids that they're facing. So being mindful of the dramatic shift that needs to happen to take care of the young minds at these universities. Deferred enrollment, people who want to wait out and hope for that experience to come. The declining budgets are real. It's different for public and private institutions. State funding is already down for most state universities, and when you're going to have to make cuts because of auxiliary revenue or declining enrollment, where tuition and fees is the majority of an organization's revenue, notating those things in your asks with these universities at least acknowledges your understanding of their current position, which is, I think, very supportive in trying to build a partnership. So I think I trust all those more or less.
Yeah.
And as an administrator, I really am sitting in the seat of being cognizant of how you address higher education and understanding that, yes, there are needs and products that we really need, but approaching those with the sensitivities of what the organizations are facing is imperative.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Ashley. Oh, and Tami, so I'm going to make one comment and I'll hand it over to you. So I think, here you mentioned the word partnership, and so it's for vendors, suppliers, for businesses, explaining how what you're offering can facilitate, address, solve any of these issues is really going to help faculty administrators make the decisions around what you're offering. And so that's why I really thank you for this, because I really wanted to talk about this, because it is the challenges and the pain points that we as marketers like to talk about and explain how we can solve them. They're different right now, and it's and you guys don't know how to solve these because a lot of them are new or on a much larger scale. So that's one of the things that I think is really critical as we as businesses try to move into the higher education space. The solutions that you're talking about and the way you're talking about your product is going to be really different in a lot of cases. Tami, what thoughts did you have on this?
So anytime I see the word challenge, I think, okay, how am I going to help solve this? And my has been in communications, which has transitioned from public relations, corporate communications, media relations into influencer relations. And I'm a storyteller. So I'm looking at these challenges being like, who can tell the story of why to avoid deferred enrollment? Let's find some students who are just crushing it in their dorm room, or maybe in, maybe they're at home, but maybe there's a partnership. Maybe Best Buy is on this call, and maybe there's an opportunity for a co-branded partnership with a university and Best Buy to show how, like, this super affordable laptop with this high-powered camera, with this microphone that you can add into your USB port, makes you feel like you're in the classroom, and the sound quality and audio quality and all this, and you can get it all at Best Buy, but that's only if you don't defer your enrollment at X university and blah, blah, blah. So I'm just thinking there's so many opportunities for students, administrators, donors, everybody that was on Ashley's kind of list before. There's so many opportunities for that. You talked about the mental health opportunities or challenges that are presented today. At Find Your Influence, we're working today with, I think, 3 or 4 different state health departments to promote mask wearing, to talk about hand washing, about COVID safety. So maybe on the call today, there's someone who's producing masks or other PPE or hand sanitizer. How can you partner with schools to deliver that message in a healthy way? Again, that mental health, I was thinking of, I always hear ads on podcasts for Better Health, which is an app where you can connect with counselors. I don't know the different counselors that may be available on campuses, maybe virtually. How can you create some awareness using that student population, using parents of saying, wow, my student really wouldn't have made it if he or she didn't have access to this service? Because then they're talking to others in their peer network of saying, oh, well, my son's a senior in high school, maybe he should consider that university. It's also offering all of these benefits that I know he could take advantage of. So I look at the word challenges here and I'm like, nope, I've got a story for that. I've got a story for that. And I've got a story.
So thank you, Tami. And so what you just did is going to be a great segue into the rest of what we're going to bring it home with. You just walked everyone through the process of how you develop your influencer marketing campaign. So that was fantastic. So thank you both. So yeah, so let's talk about how to design a solid program. And again, I chose this example, and I'm trying to give visuals to support what Tami's saying so that everyone gets a really good idea of what it is she's talking about, how to make it happen. So Tami, keep going.
Yeah, so finding the right influencers is the most important part of designing that solid program. You also have to understand what is your message. And when you deliver it to your influencers, your thought leaders, whomever you want to deliver it, what I would suggest doing is delivering it in kind of a campaign brief form. Here are the topics we want you to cover in your social post, in your webinar, in your podcast, whatever it is. Here's kind of the guardrails, but also just as important, because we know every brand has a legal team behind it. Here are the things you cannot say. You cannot make these claims. You cannot do this and in that. And so designing that program of what you want it to hopefully look like when it comes out the other end, that's important, but you also can't script what you want these influencers or thought leaders to say for you. Once it's scripted, no one wants to listen. Everyone tunes out. I know what Liz's voice sounds like as a friend. I know her tone. So if she was just sitting here reading today and being very robotic, I'd be like, that's not Liz at all. And I think that's kind of what you were hoping for in this conversation. Yes, we talked through how we were going to connect today, but we didn't talk through how the whole conversation flow would go. You've given us that freedom. And that's what you want to do when you work with individuals, is give them that freedom to share their experience. They're not going to go out there and be like, this was the worst product I've ever used, because they're likely getting paid or gifted the product. They would rather say, hey, I can't talk about this. I prefer your competitor, or this isn't something that I would normally use. And then once you've got your influencer selected, you've kind of given them the direction you want them to go. Also understand, what are you going to measure at the end? A lot of times influencer marketing is what we call top of the funnel marketing metrics. So it's really focused on awareness and engagement. Bottom of the funnel metrics are more driving you to purchase. Now, influencer marketing is still effective to drive people to purchase. How many of you have seen on LinkedIn that you can just swipe up on somebody's story or click on their link in bio and be driven to like the exact page to check out? You can do that, but a lot of times you have to have that message repeated and repeated and repeated before somebody will actually take that action. So that's why we see influencer marketing as a top of funnel metric more often than not. But those performance metrics could be, you could be measuring awareness, which how many people saw it on LinkedIn and scrolled by it. Impressions, awareness and impressions are the same thing. And then there's the engagement, and the engagement is how many people liked it or how many people commented on it. I think the like is more of a vanity metric. That's cool that they liked it. Did they remember it? I think that real meaningful engagement is the comment or the direct message, because that's what you can measure. What are they asking? A comment with like the high five emoji, I don't know that that's great value either, because I don't know if they're high fiving me or the content that I produced. But if someone says, hey, I love that post, Tami, it really resonated with me when you talked about mentorship. I really liked that. Would you be available to connect and maybe go a little bit deeper with me? That's a meaningful engagement. And that's really, I think, one of the most important metrics, aside from driving sales, that is most important when it comes to influencer marketing.
Yeah, thank you for that, Tami. I appreciate you walking everyone through the step-by-step. So let's move to how do you even find, like, what are some of the things finding the right influencers? And you had shared a great story, and I wasn't able to find her, that prompted me to put up Kimmy Swimmy, but I think maybe using that really interesting story can help everyone sort of really think wide about who might be the right influencer.
So there's an influencer for any product or anyone. I was kind of searching for, I don't want to say random, but I guess I'll say random, some non-traditional influencers. And I found a Asian female ice fisherwoman, not fisherman, ice fisherwoman who lives in Minnesota. Now, how very specific of a niche is that? So if there was someone selling, I don't know if fishing poles are different for ice fishing than traditional fishing. I'm not a fisher myself, but if there was, and they were looking to sell to an Asian market, and maybe they just launched a new store in Minnesota, what a perfect influencer that woman would be for that campaign. At Find Your Influence, we've worked with some food brands who have said, we want to work with females who have a Hasidic Jewish background and live in one of the 5 boroughs in New York. I mean, you're like, how are we going to find that? Well, we found those people, and the campaign was executed flawlessly. So don't just say, oh, I don't think I can do influencer marketing. There's no one out there talking about my brand. Oh, they are. They might not have millions of followers. And that's what's important when we're thinking about B2B considerations here, is the relevancy is more important than the follower count. Because even if you have a smaller following, you're very relevant to those people who are following you. And if it's 200 or 300 people, that's a direct audience that's your target demographic right there, and they're likely very highly engaged. So I think it's important when we're thinking about finding those right influencers to really focus on relevancy instead of that follower.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for pointing out the quality piece of that. And so let's, do you have any thoughts on handling controversy? I can think of like getting ahead of it, and then if it happens, maybe you have a story or something that you can share. And Ashley, I'll hand it over to you too if you want to chime in on anything controversial or anything that Tami's been talking about up to now. So Tami, what about controversy?
So I just saw a story this week that was talking about social media influencers on campus that are being paid to promote health and safety around COVID, but they're not paying their student athletes. So they're not paying their football players, but they're paying influencers. And I thought that was a really interesting topic, because I was like, oh, wow, these universities are going to have to handle this really quickly, because paying student athletes is very top of mind, and it's just a conversation every new sports season that comes out. And so I think it's very different. If one of these influencers happen to be the quarterback of the football team and he's getting paid to promote COVID safety, is that allowed because he's a student athlete? So I think there's just a lot of considerations that have to go into it. What you said about getting in front of controversy, I think that's important, but my head keeps going back. I'm a fan of the TV show The Office. And at some point in one of the later seasons, they start selling printers, and their printers caught fire. And so I think they held a press conference, which was completely unnecessary and very silly, to talk about how their printers don't catch fire. But my point in this is that there are people whose printers didn't catch fire. Let's talk to those people. Let's have those people share their experience. And yes, I know that's a risk. I'm working, with the company right now on their recall for it, and I'm following all their safety procedures. It's unplugged when I'm not using it, whatever that might be. But even if you're in a
Mhm.
situation where you're having a crisis, it may not be impacting everyone. Let's go find those people who it's not impacting and have them share their story about how maybe they feel safe and secure, and they're working directly with the brand to get a solution or a remedy.
Right. And Ashley, do you have any thoughts on that? Because it sounds like Tami was saying, control the conversation and don't make it more than it really is, were the two things I really felt like you were saying. So Ashley, do you have any experience, or have you followed anyone and been like, whoa, can't believe that happened?
Well, I'm speaking from an administrator on college campus, university campuses, which controversy is just par for the course. And I think that means that there is considerations. And when I think about, Tami's expertise in influence marketing, how do you partner and start talking about the what if, right? Because there's always going to be someone who is going to have something smart to say about whatever message you're delivering. And knowing that what gets set up is thoughtful and trying to put a message out is just being very clear in what it's not, and making sure that the constituents, mostly the administration, is prepared for what was the intent, what is the message, and are we aligned in that message. So when faculty get up in arms about someone being chosen to be an influencer over another faculty member, for example, or a student's upset that it shows one product over another, how do we manage that? It's par for the course. You can't hide from it. It is a college university where controversy, in most cases, is encouraged, and that's not right or wrong, in my opinion. I think that is freedom, but it is something to consider. But definitely, like I've mentioned, not a barrier to entry, just a partnership in making sure, like anything with marketing or PR, the what ifs. How is this going to land for this community of people, and how will this land for this community of people? And as long as you're aligned and you've communicated across your campus constituents to an appropriate level, it will be a very effective medium for sure.
Yeah, thank you. And so that, it's setting expectations. I think that one of the things you started off with is really important too, is talking to all the different stakeholders, inside of the university, if you're going to be partnering with a brand, and giving them a heads up, like, this is going to happen. We're going to get trolled. We're going to get bad comments. It will happen. Here's how we'll handle it, blah, blah, blah. So that's really, yeah. So thank you both for those points. I think they're really important. And they make it seem, it's not scary. Everyone can handle it. Don't be afraid of this medium. It can be really powerful and help you. So I'm going to take it back for 1 second while Kara gets some of the questions pulled together. So, how does this all, connect back to your business? So you're going to do some of these influencer campaigns, and at some point you're either going to drive a bunch of people to your website to find out more. Maybe you've offered, a free content or a drawing, some sort of way to capture an initial contact. So with the higher education market, we've got our tried and true data, and we've also got some new data at Agile Education Marketing. And what we can help you do is, once you start to get those people expressing interest, we can help you understand, in some of the top universities, we have course level data. So what is that person teaching? Or conversely, what courses do you have offerings for, and who's teaching them, and are those people the ones that are coming in? And so you can gauge success potentially. We also, when you're trying to contact people, you may actually decide that as a follow-up, a physical mailing, which is another whole other conversation we have right now, but it's with COVID, it's having a resurgence, so that's why I bring it up as an example. We have a new address schema, and so we have 3 levels of building addresses. We also have faculty phone and email, so we can help facilitate some of that contact information. If you're just requesting a name and university, some of that can be backfilled, or you can find out who else might be at that institution that might be relevant to have a conversation with. And the final point that I just want to make about working with Agile is, we can integrate into your existing business systems some of this data. So that's, if you want to talk to us more about that, that's great. But again, influencer marketing is something that can really help you right now bridge the gap. You might be, conferences haven't happened, so your prospect leads might be a little paltry right now. You're having trouble just connecting with people. And so, give it a try and So I think that, you know, Ashley and Tami did a really nice job of laying the groundwork, understanding that some of the pitfalls and challenges that you might experience and how to address those and how to design a really solid plan. So thank you both so much, you know, for doing this with us. This was very much, you know, a collaborative effort and an iterative effort as well. And so I think that that probably came across. You know, again, that's, you know, this is Tami's time and Ashley's time, and, you know, their goal is to really help educate and inform you all. So Kara, do you, could I hand it over to you, and are there some questions that have come in?
Yes, before I jump to the questions, I'm going to do 2 polls for you guys. The first one I'm going to put up is if you currently do influencer marketing. So I'm going to launch that one right now and give you guys a couple of minutes. And then you can also send in your questions right now as well as we're doing this. And I also want you guys to send in either to the chat or into the questions on if you've done influencer marketing, you have experts on the panel right now, what questions do you have if it didn't work for you? Or if you just have any other things that you want to pick their brains on, we have them here for you now, so get them in. Okay.
Thanks.
So this is pretty interesting. We have about 24% saying that they do influencer marketing right now. So that's great. Yeah. Obviously, I think when you attend these events, it's you either do it and you're practicing it right now and you want to learn more about how you can do it successfully, or you don't do it right now and you want to learn how to do it. Okay, so the next one, will you try to incorporate influencer marketing after attending this webinar? Well, I think we have a consensus. 100% are saying yes. Oh, someone, okay, we got 6% saying no, but we're still on the upside. So we've done a
Thank you, Kara,
during this presentation to get people to understand the importance of it and how they can do it. So now I'm going to move into our questions. So there's someone who's entering the higher ed market right now. Is influencer marketing a good entry point for starting in the higher ed market, or would you recommend a different approach?
I think it's a good entry point. I wish I knew a little bit more about what the product was or what the brand was. But I think it's a great place because if you're just starting in the higher education market, your marketing budget may be smaller. And why don't you test and try different things on the influencer side that you couldn't necessarily do if you were doing a digital spend with a LinkedIn ad. It's going to cost you more money to test and optimize there. And it's a lot more friendly to your budget to do that on the influencer side.
Okay, perfect. And then we just got the response. They offer educational videos for K through 12 educators to see interest at the higher ed space. So I think, like you said, starting it out in social, kind of testing the waters, especially with the startup, like you said, budget and funding, you want to be sure that the product is something that will be taken wisely and understood in the market.
And I think you can learn a lot about the online audience when you start an influencer marketing. What you can learn a lot from the reporting that you see, how campaigns perform, and you can take that and apply that if you're going to do a LinkedIn ad buy, if you're going to maybe have content sponsored in the Chronicle for Higher Education or Inside Higher Ed or one of those media channels. You can learn a little bit more about that buying audience through the influencer marketing channels.
Perfect. We've gotten a lot of good ones, so I'm glad we have a couple of minutes extra with everyone for this hour. How do you approach someone to do influencer marketing for you? How do you start the conversation and what do you offer them? And I think one thing for me too as a marketer, do you reach out on social? Do you do a phone call? Do you do an email? So what channel and conversation would you start with?
So I would say, first, who is this influencer? Is this someone who, what channel, how did you learn about them? What channel are they most active on? And then if it's a thought leader, if it's a donor, if it's a board member, if it's someone who's a professional and not maybe an influencer by trade every day, I think you reach out by phone or by email or whatever channel you initially connected with them on. If it's a student or someone younger who you want to engage, I think a direct message on Instagram is a great place to start. But what I would say, if you're reaching out to younger people to engage, give them all the information up front. Because they're going to read it and they're going to like, I'm not interested, and they're going to, in their terms, ghost you and not respond. But if you were to say, hey, Ashley, I have this great opportunity for you to partner with my brand. I'd love to talk to you about what your rates could look like for this paid opportunity. They hear money, they hear, kind of a brand partnership. That's going to get them to engage if you're speaking to the younger generation. Ashley, is there anything that you would add? I feel like I'm talking over you.
No, this is your area, so you're not talking over me. Or I'm liking what I'm hearing. I agree with you. And as an administrator, it'd be really nice to see more of these tactics versus the aggressive emails I receive. So I hope everyone's really tuning in.
With that, Ashley, what would be one of the, as marketers, sometimes we send emails to someone who's not expecting it and they may not want our product. What would be an aggressive email that you would get that'd be kind of like, oh, that put a bad taste in my mouth? Or even though you're hitting on all the spots, possibly, maybe, I don't want to work with you.
I think it goes to the challenges and the pain points and making sure that you're spending just a few more moments understanding what the university's initiatives are. Like I mentioned, most of this stuff is easily and readily accessible on the university website. Strategic plans, read them. Understanding who is on the cabinet and the executive team, understand it, do a little bit of research, and then put into the frame what is the landscape of higher ed and what are they dealing with. But blanket messages, or I use the word aggressive, of clearly you're not reading my email, or you must be busy, I'm popping this to the top. I get offended. It's like, if someone showed that they have taken time to understand my institutional position and what I'm facing, it's a lot more relatable, for sure.
Perfect. And I think as marketers, that's something we can all practice and continually visit our plans on and learn how to do it ourselves. So we got a few more questions coming in. Can you talk about how affiliate marketing fits in with influencer marketing?
Yes. So affiliate marketing is a lot of times commission-based marketing. And so a lot of brands work with affiliate programs. At Find Your Influence, we work with several big affiliate programs. Commission Junction, I know, is a big one, and I'm blanking on all the other ones we work with right now. But what happens is one of their affiliate representatives will say, hey, I am doing work with X brand, and I would really like to boost my affiliate numbers by working with influencers. And I'd be even willing to share a cut of my affiliate commission with the influencers or the thought leaders. And so, yes, they're still willing to pay them maybe a smaller rate up front with that affiliate commission rate on the back end. And what that allows the affiliate to do is to see which influencers are the top performers. So you're likely going to give each creator, assuming you're working with more than one, which most people do in a campaign, you're going to give everybody a different UTM tracking code. So I know when someone swipes up on Ashley's content, I know when someone swipes up on Liz's content, and I can really see who's performing. And then if I want to do a campaign later, I can pick the top 5% of the performers to work with. Or I know that Kara's content didn't work, so I'm not going to work with Kara moving forward on my next campaign. So there's definitely opportunities for affiliates, marketing groups to work within influencer marketing, and we see it a lot.
Perfect, thank you. And then this will be our last question. How can this be best applied to a curriculum product where the content can be used in several different areas of a college, academics, athletics, financial aid, and more?
Do you want to take this, Ashley, or you want me to go first?
You can go first.
So I think if your product can be applied to many different parts of the university, that gives you so many more voices to use. So if it can be used in the classroom, if it can be used in athletics, if it can be used in library services, whatever it might be, now you have different talking points where you can deliver that message in a different way to a different audience. So I wouldn't consider that a problem. I would consider that a huge advantage, because your product probably serves athletes differently than it serves librarians, differently than it serves campus security, but you can tell that story in a way that hits that audience. So I think that's a real opportunity for a brand that can cross different sections of the campus that way.
Right, and I think it's important to show the connectedness of what that product does through the whole chain, because the needs and I guess application is going to look very different for each of those areas. You mentioned a few: athletics versus campus safety versus academics versus facilities, for example. And how do you draw that connection and point to the fact that it's a connected campus offering and address that without saying, well, this just will help everybody. Well, tell us how it's going to help everyone before you make a blanket comment. So I think that is really important.
And Ashley, sorry to jump in, Kara, but how does the money flow? How do budgets get spent? So if there is a product that can go across many colleges, many different departments, is there anyone who holds purse strings to make purchase decisions like this? Or do you really have to go to the individual departments and groups to get those different decisions to get made?
Right. I mean, scale is really big. For public institutions, I've seen limits that vice presidents have to sign off on anything $5,000 or more.
Wow.
Program software needs to go through central IT vetting process to ensure that it meets the compliance and security of FERPA. So there's a lot of, I'm going to call it red tape as universities try to tighten their business processes, but spending at a very, very low level is very unlikely at universities. And many purchases do happen rarely at a director level, but most certainly at a senior director, executive director, vice president level. And for larger purchases, $50,000 or more, the president in a lot of cases will see that, depending on the size of the institution.
Okay. Thank you. That was really helpful. Kara, do you have any more come in?
I just have one more, and so we have 2 minutes left, and I think it's a semi-important one. I know we talked about hashtag higher ed and being on social. Obviously, that's going to be a hashtag that everyone uses to get the attention. What's some other tags or things that would be less clouded that they could use to find an influencer rather than just higher ed?
So I think it depends on the platform. For this case, let's talk about LinkedIn. So you're right, higher ed is going to be super clouded. But it depends on who your audience is. Let's say you're selling into the registrar. What is important to the registrar? Is it transcripts? Is it credentials? Is it digital transcripts, digital credentials? So understand who you're trying to reach and what's important to them. And then within your network, who are those people? Or someone who knows someone, and then maybe set up a phone call with a registrar and say, hey, what if you were on LinkedIn and you were trying to search for a solution that did X, what would you look for? And then try to search for those and see what's coming up yourself. You don't want to be buried in hashtag higher ed, but if hashtag digital transcript is something that you're offering and you go on there and you're like, wow, there really aren't that many things that are coming up for that, then take advantage of that, because you don't want to get lost in the conversation. You want to be the conversation.
Yeah.
That is great. I think that's a perfect question that we can end on, and top of the hour. We are so timely. I just want to say thank you to everyone who attended. You will be receiving a copy of the presentation and a copy of the presentation slide deck. And again, if you want to fill out our 3-question survey at the end of this webinar, you can get a free consult with one of your Agile executives, and also give us feedback on what you want to see next time and how you enjoyed this webinar.
Thank you, Kara. Thank you both very much for joining us today, and all the thought and work that went into delivering on our topic. Have a great rest of your week, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Take care.